Welcome to the Week 14 Sports Betting Picks video here at FTN Bets, otherwise known as Betting with Benny, where we take a look at the opening lines from DraftKings and FanDuel, compare them to our power rankings, and see if we can find some value. So the first game we're going to talk about this week is going to be the Raiders against the Rams on Thursday Night Football. Las Vegas is 5-7 on the year, coming off a win against the Los Angeles Chargers, 27-20 in their last game. The Rams 3-9 on the year, coming off a loss to Seattle, 27-23. So John Wolford was back at quarterback for the Rams. Obviously, Matthew Stafford being out means that they're going to be going with a backup. Last week it was Perkins. This week it was Wolford. They looked a little bit better. They moved the ball a little bit better this week under Wolford as well. So when I break this game down, I get the Raiders, despite being on the road, I get the Raiders on a neutral field. They're about 2.5 points better, or about 1.5 points better, actually. When you factor in home field advantage, I get it up to about maybe 2.5 or 3 is the number that I'm looking at here. DraftKings has Las Vegas favored by 5. FanDuel has Las Vegas favored by 4.5. So I think that's too many points here. Do I really want to take the Rams, though? That's the question that it comes down to. Rams plus 5. Listen, according to my numbers, I probably got at least 1.5 to 2 points of value on it. I know it doesn't seem all that great, but honestly, the Rams probably should have won this weekend against the Seattle Seahawks in that game that they played there. Seahawks came back, had a touchdown right there at the end after the Rams scored a touchdown with like a little over 2 minutes left, I think, to put them up in that game. They gave up a touchdown on the other end to DK Metcalf to wind up losing it, but they kept the game close here. This game is in LA. Again, like the Raiders haven't been a great team. They've looked a lot better in recent weeks, but overall, they're not really all that good. So I actually think the value here is probably on taking the points with the Rams and going Rams plus 5. So Thursday Night Football, short week as well. Rams plus 5 is the way I'm looking at it here with the home team. Next game up, my New York Jets taking on the Buffalo Bills. Jets are 7-5 on the year. They're coming off a loss to Minnesota, 27-22. They were down big at halftime in that game and then came back in the second half. The problem with the Jets is they settled for field goals on like 4 straight drives, which was great. They were putting points up on the board, but you're not going to win games against good teams if you're just getting field goals every time down. They really needed to get in the end zone, and they weren't able to do that. As for Buffalo is 9-3. They beat the New England Patriots 24-10 on Thursday Night Football. So we got to give them a little bit of adjustment upward because they have a little bit of extra rest coming into this game as well. So a lot of things in Buffalo's favor here. Buffalo is at home in this game as well. Buffalo is the better team. I hate to say that as a Jet fan, but it's the truth. So, I'm not telling you guys anything that you don't already know. On a neutral field, I get Buffalo is better by a little over a touchdown. About 7.5 points is the number that I get. When you factor in home field advantage, I get Buffalo at 9.5. FanDuel and DraftKings both opened this at Buffalo at 9.5 as well. So we're right on market. There's really no value here. Again, I don't really want to be on either side of this game right here. I don't want to tease it down. 9.5 only gets you to 3.5. We're not crossing those key numbers. There's really nothing to talk about here. Next game up, the Cleveland Browns taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. Cleveland is 5-7 on the year. They are coming off a win over the Houston Texans, 27-14. So a couple things to mention about this game. Deshaun Watson made his first start of the year. Deshaun Watson pretty much looked like trash in that game. He did have an interception. He only threw for like 100 and something yards. He ran for about another 20 yards or so. Did not account for any touchdowns with this offense. Did not have a single touchdown drive while he was under center. All 3 of the touchdowns that Cleveland scored in this game happened to be on defense. So the good news is the defense looks really good. They're going to get a much stiffer test this week against the Cincinnati Bengals than they had last week against the Houston Texans. So be interesting to see how they, how they wind up coming up and taking care of that one. Cincinnati, on the other hand, they are 8-4 now, coming off a big win over the Kansas City Chiefs. 27-24 was the final in that game here. When I break this down on a neutral field, I get Cincinnati is probably about 2 points better than the Cleveland Browns. I have the Cleveland Browns slightly above average. I have Cincinnati even higher above average than that. When you factor in home field advantage, I get Cincinnati -4 is my number. DraftKings and FanDuel both have this at 4.5. So with me being at Cincinnati -4, DraftKings and FanDuel having it at 4.5, we're pretty much right on market on this game right here. So not a lot to really talk about overall. Don't really see any bets in here. I would like to see Deshaun Watson play a little bit better. If I had to put a bet on this game, I'd rather be on the Cincinnati side because I thought Cincinnati looked really good beating Kansas City, and I wasn't all that impressed with Cleveland, who needed their defense to really step up and do all the scoring in order for them to beat the Houston Texans. Speaking of the Houston Texans, the next game, the Battle of Texas, the Houston Texans taking on the Dallas Cowboys. Houston is 1-10-1 on the year. Currently, the the number one. I'm not going to say the lock because things could still change, but currently they are in the driver's seat to get the number one overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft. They're coming off that loss that we just mentioned to Cleveland, 27-14. Don't really know what to say here. I mean, Brandon Cooks, their number one receiver, missed that game there. They got a little bit of a problem at quarterback. They're trying to figure out how that goes. Dameon Pierce, basically the only good player on this team that is, fantasy and betting relevant. Nico Collins, yeah, he had a touchdown, but I don't think he only had like 3 catches last week. Like, there's really not a lot here with this Houston Texans team. They are the last place team in my power rankings, as well as being the last place team in the NFL right now. Dallas is 8-3. They play on Sunday Night Football against Indianapolis, a game that is actually on in the background right now. It's halftime of that game. That's when we're recording this. It's pretty close here. Dallas has not looked all that great. I think they scored right before the half, so they're actually up a couple points here right now. They haven't really looked all that great here. Indy is not a team that I give a lot of respect to, but, again, Dallas is doing what they have to do. We'll see how the second half goes. Assuming there are no major injuries there, let's see here. On a neutral field, I get Dallas 11 points better. Dallas being home gives them the home field advantage. I would have them around Dallas minus 13. FanDuel has this game at minus 15.5. DraftKings still does not have a number out for this game here. 15.5 is too many points. Now, is it too many points that it's going to put me on the Houston side of this game? No, it would probably have to be even higher than this for me to be interested in Houston here. But it's enough points above where it also is going to be keeping me off of the Dallas side of this game. If they were to put this at 13.5, I probably would have still taken Dallas there. 13, I would have taken Dallas. Anything above 14, though, it's just, you guys remember the Miami game 2 weeks ago? Miami was up 30-0 after the second quarter. Wound up putting in their backups, and then Houston got a couple late touchdowns. And that's the thing that scares me the most here. Like, I don't think Houston can beat Dallas. I think Dallas is going to win this game easy. I just don't want to lay 15.5 points. That's a lot of points to have to lay here. So I'm going to be avoiding that one. But like I said, it's not enough points that it's going to put me onto the Houston Texans side. Next game up, the Minnesota Vikings taking on the Detroit Lions. Minnesota 10-2 on the year. They're coming off a win over my New York Jets, 27-22. They looked really good in the first half. The second half, they struggled a little bit, but hey, they did what they had to do to get the win there, so they did come out victorious. Let's see. We got the Detroit Lions on the other side. Detroit is 5-7 on the year. They're coming off a really good win against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They beat up the Jacksonville Jaguars. 40-14 was the final score in that game. They look good on defense. They look great on offense. So we'll have to see how that plays out going forward here. Let's see. I have Minnesota as a team that's above average. I have Detroit as a team that's below average. When you put the two of them together, I get Detroit is better by about a touchdown or so. When you factor in home field advantage, I get it down to like Minnesota -5, Minnesota -5.5. DraftKings and FanDuel opened this game at 2.5, and I just don't think that's enough points. I have no problem laying 2.5 points with the Minnesota Vikings here. I think this spread should be at least 2 to 3 points higher. Like I said, 5.5 is the number that I got coming up here. I respect Detroit. I do think that they're better. I think that, DeAndre Swift looked pretty good. Amon-Ra St. Brown looked great. Jamal Williams got the, weekly Jamal Williams touchdown. Jared Goff is better than I think a lot of people give him credit for being. With that being said, is this really a team that, we don't think of? Like Minnesota is 10-2. Minnesota is one of the best teams in the NFL right now. The Detroit Lions are a team that aren't even going to make the playoffs here. So I don't get this spread at all. It doesn't make any sense to me. As long as this remains under 3, I think there's a ton of value on the Minnesota Vikings side. So I like Minnesota Vikings -2.5, lay the 2.5 with them all day long. You can lay 2.5 on both DraftKings and FanDuel right now. So whichever one you're on, feel free to go ahead and lay some points there. Next game up, the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the New York Giants. Philly, the best record in the league at 11-1. The Giants, 7-4-1. Philly is coming off a good win against the Tennessee Titans. 35-10 was the final score in that game. Again, Philly's defense looked really good, holding Tennessee to 10 points. Their offense looked really good, putting up 5 touchdowns. Really nothing you can complain about here. If you're an Eagles fan, you had to be very happy about what you saw there. The New York Giants, on the other hand, blew a game that they should have won. They were up 20-13 on the Washington Commanders. They let the Commanders come back and tie that game up. They wound up going into overtime. They had some chances in overtime. They wound up punting the ball away towards the end there. They got a big sack at like the 1 yard line. And then they gave up a run, and they let the game slip away. The Giants they're not explosive enough to beat good teams here, and I think that's going to be the problem they have with the Philadelphia Eagles here. So when I break the numbers down on this game, I get Phillies about 7.5 points better on a neutral field. Factor in home field advantage for the Giants. You get it down to like Philly -5, maybe 5.5. FanDuel and DraftKings have it at 6.5 here. So again, this is another one of those situations where, my numbers say I got about a point worth of value on the Giants. 5.5 to 6.5. I mean, 6 is like a semi-key number, but really, I do not want to be on the Giants side of this game, and that's the problem that I have, right? Like, if I'm going to take anybody in this game, it's going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, under 7, I think the Eagles are an interesting team to look at here. I would rather take the Eagles and lay the -6.5 points than take the Giants at +6.5. Even though my numbers say there's a little bit of value on the Giants side. So for me, I'd rather be on the Eagles side here, but because my numbers are telling me not to bet the Eagles here, I'm probably just going to avoid this game and stay away from it. But again, I'm not going to be betting on the Giants, even though my numbers say there's a point of value there. Next game up, Baltimore Ravens taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Baltimore 8-4 on the year. They are coming off a win, 10-9 over the Denver Broncos on a last-second rushing touchdown by backup quarterback Tyler Huntley. So here's the problem I have with this game right now. It's like I can give you guys my number with Lamar and I can give you guys my number with Huntley, but until we know exactly what the deal is and whether or not Lamar is going to be in this game, and and another thing I want to talk about here too before we do this is I only made a small adjustment for Huntley versus Lamar, and some people might say that's, oh my God, are you kidding me? That's blasphemous. But remember, Huntley did make some starts for Lamar Jackson in the past. We saw him last year make a couple starts there. The kid's not that bad. He's a pretty good guy. He was a big time prospect before he went into college, coming out of Florida State. And honestly, he looked pretty good over there. The other thing too is it's not like Lamar Jackson is lighting the world on fire right now. At the beginning of the season, you could have made that case that maybe you have to make a bigger adjustment for it. But really, this passing game isn't really doing all that much lately. It's not like they're putting up massive numbers here. They're pretty much struggling with Lamar on the center. And again, I'm not saying that Huntley is the answer and they're going to be better. It's still an adjustment downward that I'm making, but I don't think it needs to be that big of an adjustment. So when I break everything down here, I end up getting Baltimore being about 3.5 to 4 points better on a neutral field with Huntley as the quarterback, which would mean that you'd be looking at Baltimore -1.5, -2. DraftKings, because of the, up in the air situation with Lamar Jackson, has not put an opening line out on this game yet. And FanDuel has it at 1.5. So FanDuel is basically thinking probably the same thing that I'm thinking here, is that there's not a massive adjustment that needs to be made. So, again, I don't really have any value here. If Lamar does play, then I would think it's not enough points here and you want to be on the, the Baltimore side. But assuming that Huntley's going to be the quarterback here again, again, my number's -2. The number FanDuel has is -1.5. I don't really see any value there. So not anything that we could really bet on. Next game up, the last of the 1 o'clock games here, the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Tennessee Titans. Jacksonville is 4-8. They just got absolutely bludgeoned by the Detroit Lions, 40-14 in their last game here. Travis Etienne is a little banged up coming into this game. Trevor Lawrence got a little banged up in this game. He left the game for a little bit, but did wind up coming back and finishing it here. I just mentioned this because Jacksonville was a team that a lot of people thought was going to beat Detroit last week, and they wound up being the ones who caught the beating. So, I'm a little bit weary of this team right now, and they're going up against a Tennessee team that's kind of licking their wounds after getting beat up by Philadelphia 35-10. Now, the difference to me between both of these teams losing by 25, 30 points in their last games is losing to the Philadelphia Eagles 35-10. Again, it doesn't feel good, but it doesn't tell me that the Titans aren't a good team. The Titans are still a very good team. They just happen to run into a better team. Whereas Jacksonville went into a team that's not very good and wound up losing by 26 points. So I think their loss is a lot worse than the loss that the Titans had here. When I break this game down, I get the Titans are about 5 points better on a neutral field, factor in home field advantage. I get the spread on this should be Titans -7. I am way off from what FanDuel and DraftKings have. They have it at -3.5. I just don't think -3.5 is enough points here at all. DraftKings even has that -3.5 juice down. to minus 105. So this is what I wanted to kind of say to everybody here. Juice down at minus 105 means there's a better chance this number goes to 3 than there is that this number goes to 4 over on DraftKings. So do I want to rush out and take the minus 3.5 right now? I'm not going to do that because there is a chance that we see a 3. And if we see a 3, I love minus 3. I would be all over minus 3 if this number drops down to minus 3. So Tennessee, I like them at 3.5, but I really want to see if I can get that down to minus 3 over on DraftKings or any of the other books that we can use either. If you can find this at minus 3, I love it, and I think you should bet on it. If you can't find it at minus 3, though, again, if you have to take 3.5, I still think we have over 3 points of value here, which is a really good number, but I'm going to kind of be staying away from it here. So there you go. That wraps it up for the 1 o'clock games. We're going to take a quick commercial break and be right back with the 4 o'clock games, the Sunday night game, and the Monday night game here on Betting with Benny. And welcome back to the Week 14 Sports Betting Picks video here at FTN Bets, otherwise known as Betting with Benny. If you guys are watching on YouTube, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button so that you're updated anytime we have a new video that drops. And for those of you who are watching on Game Plus Network, welcome to the show. We have, what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more games to talk about here. There are 6 teams that are going to be on bye here in Week 14. So it's going to be a tough week for our fantasy friends out there. And we got at least 3 less games than we would on a full schedule for those of you who like to get some money down for us to bet on this week. Atlanta, Chicago, Green Bay, Indianapolis, New Orleans, and Washington are the 6 teams that are on bye here this week. And that's why we only have 5 games left, 3 of them in the 4 o'clock window. So let's talk about those games right now. First one up is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Denver Broncos. And this is a really interesting one to me. We usually talk the sides here, not so much the totals. We get into that over at FTN Bets a little bit during the week. But one of the things I think is interesting here is Denver is a stone cold under team. This is a team that plays under almost every single game that they played this year because their offense stinks and doesn't put up a lot of points, and their defense is pretty good and limits the other team from putting up points. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens against a team like KC. That's a team that can put up a lot of points here this week. So the Chiefs are 9-3 on the year. They're coming off a loss to the Cincinnati Bengals, 27-24. Listen, nothing wrong with losing to the Bengals. Bengals are a good team. Joe Burrow played a pretty good game there. They were able to put up some points. Nothing to really be upset about here. On the other side of the game, the Denver Broncos are 3-9. They're coming off a loss to the Baltimore Ravens, who didn't even have their starting quarterback for half of that game. Final score of that game was 10-9. When I break this down on a neutral field, I get Kansas City is about 9 points better than Denver. Factor in the home field advantage for Denver up there, I get Kansas City -7. DraftKings and FanDuel. DraftKings has this at -8. FanDuel has it at -8.5. Again, this is another one of those situations where even though I have a point of value on the Denver side, it's not enough to put me on Denver. The fact that my number is a little below this, though, where there's a point to a 1.5 worth of value, probably is enough to keep me off of Kansas City. I never liked Kansas City. We used to get backdoored last year all the time on Kansas City because their defense isn't that great. The offense can score at will, and, they win a lot of games, but they didn't cover a lot of games last year. And, I still have that bad taste in the back of my mouth, even though they're doing a little bit better this year. Let's see. Next game up, the Carolina Panthers and the Seattle Seahawks. Carolina 4-8 on the season, coming off a bye, so we did have to give a little adjustment upwards for them. Seattle 7-5 on the year. They're coming off a win against the Los Angeles Rams on that last-second DK Metcalf touchdown to give them the 27-23 advantage after the defense basically coughed up a touchdown on the other end with I think Cam Akers was the one who finished it off, but John Wolford had like a 9-play, 70-yard drive or something to get them the lead there, which again, they eventually lost, but still the fact that they were able to do it is why I think the Rams are a little bit better than people are giving them credit for right now. Not that I think they're very good though, as we mentioned earlier. So when I break the numbers down in this game, I get Seattle is about 5 points favorite, 5 points better, factor in home field advantage. I think it should be Seattle -7. DraftKings has it Seattle -6. FanDuel has it at -5.5. I'm going to lay the points on Seattle at -5.5 there over on FanDuel. I think that's the way you want to go and play this game here. Like I said, anything below a full touchdown, I think there's value on. So -5.5, lay the points with Seattle here. I like that a lot. Other side, the next game up, the last game in the 4 o'clock window is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the San Francisco 49ers. Tampa Bay is 5-6 on the year. They have not played their Week 13 game yet. They are the Monday Night Football game against the New Orleans Saints. San Francisco 8-4 on the season, coming off a good win against the Miami Dolphins, 33-17 in that game here. I have been lower on Tampa Bay than most people all season long, and I'm not upset about it because it's made us a bunch of money so far this year. And I feel like I'm lower than I should be, or not that I should be. I'm lower than the books are on them again this week. When I look at this on a neutral field, I get San Francisco is about 4 to 4.5 points better than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, assuming everybody comes out of that game healthy for Tampa Bay. Factor in home field advantage. Now you're looking at San Francisco minus 6.5 is the number that I get. FanDuel has it at 3.5. DraftKings has not put a number up on this game yet. Like I said, I think Tampa Bay is overrated. So for me, I have no problem laying 3.5 with San Francisco here. I do not, as opposed to the what was the other game that we talked about here? The Tennessee game. As opposed to the Tennessee game when it was 3.5, and I thought there's a chance it can go to 3. I think this game is probably more likely to go to 4 than it is to go to 3. So if you're interested and you're on the same side that I am here with San Francisco, I think you want to lay the 3.5 now because, again, you're probably going to have to lay more points if you wait. Whereas with Tennessee, I think there is a chance that we could get a -3 there. And even if we don't get a -3, I'll gladly lay 3.5 with Tennessee at -110, which is what I think we got to do here with San Francisco. So that's the way that I'm looking at it. Like I said, FanDuel has a number up. DraftKings doesn't. By the time you guys see this, they probably will. They're just kind of waiting for things to work out over there. So that brings us to Sunday Night Football and the game between the Miami Dolphins and the Los Angeles Chargers. Miami is 8-4 on the year, coming off that loss to the San Francisco 49ers, 33-17 in that last game. One thing I did want to mention, Jalen Waddle left that game. He made a catch and he kind of limped off to the sidelines, and I didn't see him do anything for the rest of the game. Again, I was watching it on Red Zone because I had the Cincinnati Kansas City game on as the one I was watching. Maybe he did get some extra snaps in there. I'll have to double check on that, but definitely check on Jalen Waddle and what his status is going to be for this game because he's been very good so far this year. Now, again, they do still have Tyreek Hill. Sherfield had a pretty good game there. I knew he had a touchdown. He had a couple other catches later on in that game, which is why I don't think Waddle got back in because I kept seeing his name when they were showing the highlights up there. On the Los Angeles Chargers side, they are 6-6. They are coming off a loss as well. They lost to the Las Vegas Raiders 27-20 in a game that a lot of people expected them to kind of come out and win. Mike Williams did not play in that game. He's still listed as questionable. So, again, you got a stud receiver on both sides of this game that we got to wait for a little bit of an update or a little bit of news on here. When I break this whole thing down, I get Miami's about 1.5 better. So when you factor in home field advantage, to me, this game should be, I don't know, maybe a pick 'em, maybe even a Chargers slightly favored, depending on what you do with Waddle and Williams. If Williams plays and Waddle doesn't, then I think the Chargers should be favored. If they're both out, I would probably have this as a pick 'em. And if just Waddle's out, if just Williams is out and Waddle does play, then I think the value is on the Miami side. So we'll have to see how that all works out. FanDuel has a number up for this. They have this at Miami -1.5. DraftKings does not have a number on it here. I don't know. I mean, is there value here? Like when we talk about the numbers down here, when it's less than 1 on either side of the equation, there really isn't a lot of a difference between the two, right? Like -1 +1 is a very easy number. It's like, oh, it's 2 points of movement. But yeah, it's really not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a move. -1 to -3 is 2 points as well. That would be a bigger deal that I would be interested in. Whereas when it goes from +1 to -1, I don't know. It's just basically, like I said, the game's basically a coin flip here. So I don't really have anything there on this side. Like I said, I do think the Chargers at home probably deserve to be favored a little bit here, but Miami to me is the better team. I have them better on a neutral field. So, like I said, take that for what it's worth. And that brings us to the final game here, which is the Monday Night Football game between the New England Patriots and the Arizona Cardinals. New England 6-6 on the year, coming off a loss to Buffalo, 24-10. They do have a little bit of extra rest, but I'm not factoring that in all that much because Arizona's coming off a bye and they have a lot of extra rest here. So normally we'll factor in a little bit of an extra point for the team that played on Thursday night if they're playing a team that played on Sunday the week before. When you're playing a team that was on a bye, that team actually has a bigger advantage. Again, what I basically did is normally I use about 2 points for a team coming off a bye, whereas 1 point for a team that has extra rest, like in New England's case. So what I did is I just gave Arizona 1 extra point here in this game. So when I broke everything down with Arizona getting that extra point, I actually got Arizona should be favored by about 0.5 point here. So on a neutral field, on the same rest, I would have New England slightly better. On a on a little bit of extra rest here, I actually have Arizona slightly better. I have both of these teams basically around league average, so neither one is much above or below that. But we do also have to factor in the home field advantage for Arizona. Now, Arizona, not a very good team at home, so home field advantage not as big as it is in other places. But again, I still think Arizona should be favored by about 1.5 points, maybe 2 points. New England is the team that's favored on DraftKings and FanDuel by 1.5 points here, and I do not think the Patriots should be favored in this game. You can get Arizona on the money line at even money, or you could play them at plus 1.5 on both DraftKings and FanDuel at minus 110. So I don't know. I mean, to me, for 10 basis points, I'd probably just take the plus 1.5 there and give myself a win if New England winds up winning like, I don't know, 28-27 or something like that. That's probably the way that I would go about playing this game here. But again, I do like the Arizona side of this more than I like the New England side of this. Although, like I said, there isn't much of a home field advantage there for Arizona. So there you go, guys. That's going to wrap it up for all the games that we have here in Week 14. Make sure you guys get over to ftnbets.com. You can go over to ftnbets.com/free. Sign up for a free trial. Check out all the tools, all the graphs, all the charts, all the analysis, everything that we have over there. Use promo code Benny. You can even save 20% off whenever you do decide to sign up for a package and get anything. That works on FTN Daily and FTN Fantasy as well. So for my man, my producer, Quan, who keeps me looking good on this show all the time, this is Benny Ricciardi signing off for another episode of Betting with Benny here at FTN Bets.